Hello, welcome back. And in this video, I want to talk about business processes. And I find there's a lot of confusion about what these are. And if I do just a simple Google search and I want to know a bit more about business processes, I usually find a lot of excessive details and information that just for somebody who's starting off and wants just a bit more than a textbook description, they want more of a business process understanding at a high level. And this is what I intend to do in this video, is just to give you some bits about the business process. We're not going to go deep into detailing the business process. I'm just going to describe some of the high level things about the business process and also use this in context with scoping out a business architecture. But I find not just business architecture, but also when we're trying to understand the business or in agile practices, determining what user stories we need to write, well, we have to start from a level that we can decompose down into the work items. But we want some clarity of the business, and there's a few techniques that we can use to help with that. So, first of all, when we're thinking about a business process, what I tend to do is I like to draw the process in terms of boxes and lines. I don't get into deep levels of methodology. And what we're looking to do is start from our triggering flow, our trigger, go through the activities, and to reach some sort of result or conclusion. So we start from the triggering point going all the way to a result or resolution. Let's start with some definitions. So for example, what is a trigger? So let's go 1, 2, 3. First thing is a temporal event. What do we mean by a temporal event? There's usually some time-based activity. So let's take, for example, if I have a coffee shop, okay, and a time base could be that, well, it's 10 p.m. Just in my coffee shop stops at 10 p.m. We stop service. There are some things that are going to happen. We may need to count our money at the till, clean equipment, might need to power down stuff. So we have some things that happen. 10 p.m. hits, and we just have to run through our shutdown checklist. The next is an action-based or action. And an action tends to be a decision-based. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Well, somebody is coming into the shop. I have a customer. They want to order their coffee. Okay. They make a decision to come to the store to enter and to purchase a specific coffee. Just say they want a mocha. Okay. Again, another decision based. There's different types of coffee that are available. They look at the menu. They decide, here's what I want. And now the barista executes the steps needed to create a mocha within their overall steps for servicing a beverage to a customer. The next is a conditional. Okay. So a conditional is also, it's a database. So what does this mean in the context of the coffee shop? So just say I have a bag of coffee beans. This is supposed to be in my little bag. Okay. And let's just say I have 10 of those. But when I get down to 2, so there's a reduction in the inventory down to 2, then that sets a signal that perhaps we should place an order, and then we just consult with our ordering vendor, whoever they might be. Perhaps they come in, we sit down, we talk about what we need for the upcoming next couple of weeks, and place the order. Okay, so we'll call this end to end. And we'll mark this as 1. Okay, now let's go through another concept. Next concept, we want to understand process levels. And there's usually a hierarchy or scope to the process levels, from being at a high level clouds down to the dirt, if you want to use a clouds and dirt analogy. So here's some nomenclature that you might see. So for example, there's a value chain. I find a value chain is at the highest level. So if we think about different organizations, so in order for me to get the coffee using the coffee store context, farmers will have to grow the beans, to which the beans will need to be harvested, shipped to a roaster. The roaster is going to roast them and then distribute them to their customers. And those are different organizations. There's logistics that are involved, and this coffee could span multiple organizations in order to get to that coffee cup. And that sets up a chain of groups or organizations that are providing that value. And we decompose that, we can go to the value stream. So in the value stream, you can look at how the farmers are farming the bean and the specific processes that they go through in order to do that. And that leads us to the next level, the process. So we can decompose that value stream. There's specific harvesting processes. There's planting processes for the coffee at the farmer side. Those processes may break down into sub-processes. If there's, how do we hydrate coffee beans? I don't know. I'm not a coffee farmer, so I don't know those specific processes. But if you think about the farming process, is there watering? Is there fertilizer? Do we grow seeds? Do we graft these things? Again, I don't know much about coffee beans, but I do know that there are questions I can ask about those sub-processes in which there are activities. Okay, if I'm going to water the plants, then there's a specific set of activities that need to happen for us to complete the watering. Those activities can break down into very specific tasks, and those tasks have steps. In other parts of the nomenclature, you might hear something called a level 0. What's a level 0? That's a process area. At least that's how I'm going to define it. And a process area can be multiple processes that come together. It's level 0 because sometimes what I find with the process areas is there's start and stop. What I find more often is there's a cycle, the plan, do, check, adjust, some sort of management cycle that evolves from the level 0 process area. And then as we go down, so process, we'll find that's where your level 1 emerges. That's usually subdivided. Level 2, you might hear this nomenclature. And then when you get down into this is level 3. And it's not exact tasks or steps being level 3 or level 4. Usually what I find at this point is if we're doing things like UI design, then we'll be down into lower levels of specification. But definitely I wouldn't be doing UI design on something like a value chain. The level is just too high for that. We need to decompose things down into the level of detail. But when it comes to understanding what the business is, we may start up here at the value chain and say, are specific value chains in scope? Do I just want to, once the beans are farmed and shipped off, we want the roaster to be out of scope, for example. If we're looking at a business architecture and determining, well, what area of the value chain can we work in, we may have to break the scope down. I know some people say, well, if you do that, then you risk sub-optimizing other areas of the value chain. Well, that's true, but we still have to start somewhere, and we have to break things down so we understand them. And then through the work of working on one part of the value chain, we can at least set measures in what I call to the left and to the right. So for example, if this is an area of the value chain, and just say this is the roasting, then we may have the farming at one side, then there's the actual distribution to stores. Okay, if I'm saying that I want this part in scope, I could, when I'm doing the design, is to have a measure and to have a measure out here. And those measures could be around flow, for example. I don't want to be doing some work on the roasting side here, and all of a sudden I'm bottlenecking my farmers there. They have an increase in inventory, okay, when they didn't have that before, because I'm doing some changes to the roasting side of the house. And so that's what we mean by looking to the left and to the right. We want to look at the other areas of the value chain, just make sure that they're not being heavily impacted while we're doing our change. And if so, we have to make some decisions on what we're going to do to remedy that. Now with business processes, let's move to number 3 now. When you do get down lower and you establish the business process, there are 3 key, let's call them concepts. Okay, 3 concepts. 1, 2, 3. When you craft a business process, the first thing to look at is it independent? Okay, so when a customer comes to the coffee shop and they order a coffee, that process can be triggered independent of the other processes. So yes, I can have multiple customers coming in and they each can instantiate the business process independently. Next is discrete. So if the customer comes in and the customer is going to order mocha, all right, they're going to pay $5.19 for that. Maybe they even have a loyalty, so we know how many cups they've had over time, and do they get a free cup versus another customer that comes in. Next customer that comes in, they like their latte. They may not be in the loyalty program. So they independently come in and trigger an ordering sequence, but it's discrete. So meaning there's the different information that I have about these visits that I can actually track. So it's not you come in, you get black coffee, you come in, you get black coffee, you come in and get black coffee, or I just create a huge batch of black coffees and it doesn't matter who comes to the tap and pulls the black coffee. That's a way I could remove the discreteness of it by making it very commoditized. And in this case, each customer, we track the information about each of those customers. That makes it discrete. And lastly, countable. So in this particular case, that's 1 count of the process. That's 2 counts of the process. So we can count just a number of times the customers come in and ordered coffee. That's triggered a process for us to serve them a coffee. So a few more things about business processes. So I tend to draw boxes and lines for the processes. Why am I drawing a box? Well, this is an activity in a verb noun format. So serve coffee. Another could be order. And in a future set of videos, I'll go through this in more depth on establishing good business processes. But the key point here is there's a relationship. And each of these activities has a relationship. You might find that if I have those activities in scope, those might be a part of a larger, perhaps, if this is a process, Then when I group these processes together, if I have multiple, say I have another set of processes in here, then it's quite I could have a value stream for my coffee shop. So I could zoom out, just think of I'm going into Google Maps and I'm zooming it out, right? Then I'm seeing the higher level abstraction, which could be, well, how do I run my coffee shop? And we could take a look at the separate processes within the coffee shop and map those out at a higher level of abstraction. So we start to abstract away the detail. So that will allow us to provide different measures. That comes back up to this up here. Now we may take the processes, and then if we go up in the abstraction, we can take a look at the value stream. We can set different objectives on the value stream that we know when we start to tinker with the processes, we can see those objectives at the value stream level or measures start to change. Okay. Moving on to number 5, we have flow within activities. So let's take, I like to draw these boxes and lines. I'm just simplifying. Like you could use BPMN, Business Process Modeling Notation 2.0. I'm using like maybe 2% of it. A business process at a higher level is more of a conversation. I'm not looking to get into the details of specification at this point. I'm looking more to have a conversation at the higher level process areas. Again, the importance is to get to do the end. To end, we want to help our clients get through the conversation and get to the endpoints of the conversation without getting bogged down into excessive detail. There's a time and place for that, but we have to make sure we get the clarity and understanding. And what we specifically want to look at in this part is the flow of activities. So if I have the coffee shop, it's quite possible if I take this here and it's order coffee, then there's a set of flows that the barista will be stepping through. So here, so from the customer walking up to them taking the order, to entering it into their ordering system, taking money, specific payments, then the order coming up on the barista side of the bar. Now that follows a series of steps. And when we're looking at the flow within the activities, one of the things from the Agile perspective we can look at is Kaizen. Now Kaizen is the ability for us to look at a part in the flow. So just say there's a step here where perhaps they have to move a manual ticket. That can be quite onerous, is why we use a computer system, but there's something that's going on within the way that their coffee shop is designed that they may have to run a ticket over to the barista. We can look at that and say, well, if that's increasing the time, we're going to have to do this run. It might actually add another 30 seconds to the overall time it takes for the customer to get the coffee. We can look at that and say, well, how might we make that part of the process better? And we'll look at the reasons for the process and how it exists in the as-is configuration. So this is another importance is when you look at as-is, I know some people like to go to the to-be. Think, well, we're going to go to a to-be process anyhow, so let's just map out the to-be process. What happens, though, is then you don't understand what a lot of the problems are because of the as-is process. There's a lot of times that there's rules or policies that might be in place, but the people are actually not abiding by those rules and policies because it's taking them too long and the customers are getting mad. So they just kind of skirt around the rules and policies. But if we do a to-be rather than an as-is when we're trying to understand change, we might sanitize away some of those behaviors. And that can lead us to designing a process that includes those behaviors in again when we're done. So a bit of a nuance and warning there. Okay, moving on. Timing of the work. Okay. So let's just say we have a piece of a process, and this is a contract negotiation. Then I have another part of a process. I'm not sure at this point if there's anything in the middle, but it's going to be invoicing and payments. What we may be able to agree to is contract negotiation is going to be slower than invoicing and payments in terms of the number of times that we execute through these cadences. Because we'll negotiate a contract, but once we negotiate, one contract might lead into multiple invoicing and payments. So we'll find that the contract negotiation for one cycle of contract negotiation, we might maybe have 30 payments or in invoices for that example. So we find that the invoicing and payments section works. So the timing of these processes may not always be in sync, but if we're looking at composites or dependencies, then you may find that if the process is running one-to-one, then it's probably it's the same token. Token is, if we look at the noun, like payments, invoice, contract. An invoice that we set or we create the invoice to when we, just say update the line items on the invoice. Since I'm using the same token of invoice, you might find that those fall within the same process. But if we're talking about, we might have perhaps one invoice to multiple payments. The invoice has to be paid over multiple time, like maybe it's a monthly, one invoice, and we have a monthly breakdown on that. And then one contract leads to many invoices. That's a bit about the timing of the work. Artifacts of the work. So in our example here, we may have, this is my drawing of a cup of coffee. This is a physical artifact of the work. Okay, this is the actual thing that the customer wants. So that's the thing that we're building value for in this example. So if a customer is holding something in their hand, or you're transforming a piece of work as it goes, this is a physical representation of the work. There's also something that's informational. So an example of informational could be a loyalty program. I have a specific customer and they're collecting stars. And just say if they get 10 stars, they can get the free cup of coffee. Then we have knowledge oriented. Well, what does that mean? So I could have a barista, and one of the things of executing our processes is they gain skills. Okay, so you may have a barista that's starting. As you train them up and as they serve customers, they'll start to get better. And when we were talking about Kaizen of the work, it could be that there's a particular area where cleaning, and I've seen this before, a really good barista that has worked for so long, they're cleaning as they go. And that helps for things like if we need to think about how do we close the store faster when we're done. Well, if we're always cleaning as we go, then that's a way that we can be more effective at our closing processes when we think about Kaizening our operation. So it could be that this person would then take that knowledge that they've gained and train others on how to do those particular practices to make the overall system more efficient. And lastly, for number 8, for our business processes, we can document them. That's a whole part of the notation and being able to write this stuff down, is we can have a documented set of processes. And one of the things I note that if we zoom up and we go to the higher level processes, like the value chain here, what you find is if you document the value chain one time and do it well, your value chain is for the most part not going to change for a very long time. The processes that are higher up on the scale towards the top tend to be more stable if you document them well. What you'll find down here is activities, tasks, and steps. Those can change quite often. Those get refined. And as they're smaller and down in the detail level, that tends to be what happens. So we find spend the time to get your value chain, value streams, and higher level business processes documented well so that your teams understand them. Business processes must be measurable. Okay, we have to be able to put them on the scale and determine, all right, how effective are we at with these processes? And if we go all the way back up to where I started, if we go up here to our 3 key concepts of a business process, bring that back again, independent, discrete, and countable. And notice that if I have all these, then I have the ability to measure. And measure with a good standard of quality. Okay, so that's what I wanted to run through in this video, is just to put some pieces together about business processes, give a bit more understanding about those. If there's interest, let me know in the comments. And what I can do is put together some of these in a bit more detail. I can actually take a pause from the business architecture and do a dive into business processes. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this helps. Let me know if this works out for you. If you have any advice or questions, drop them in the comments.